Robert Farago here from thetruthaboutguns.com. This is my Glock 19. It's a home defense handgun. It holds 10 bullets. Well, held 10 bullets. It's now clear. Here it is. I'm in my home. This is my home defense handgun. This is a gun I can use to defend my home, my family, and myself. Now, it's legal. Purchased it in Rhode Island, passed their test, paid their fees, store and keep the gun according to the rules and regulations of the state, obey all those rules and regulations. And so now I'm sitting in my own home with my own gun, able to protect and defend myself. This doesn't really seem to me here to be a big deal. It's my right as an American to bear arms. So here I am, bearing an arm. Look at that. My gun. Yesterday, the United States Supreme Court said that Chicago cannot ban handguns in the city of Chicago. They can't do it. So supposedly this means that people in Chicago can now exercise their Second Amendment rights just like I'm doing right here, right now. Yeah, well, not really. Because what's not being reported here is that the United States Supreme Court did not say that the right to bear arms shall not be abridged by the states. In fact, they opened the door to the states, saying that the states could create reasonable regulations and restrictions on handgun or, in fact, gun use. Reasonable. One man's reasonable is another man's banned by any other name. And the man I'm talking about here is Chicago Mayor Richard Daley, the man who threatened to sodomize a reporter with a gun to prove just how dangerous guns were. In other words, basically a lunatic. A man who's got a bee in his bonnet and bodyguards all around him. And this man tomorrow is going to introduce rules and regulations to the city council, which will make it extremely difficult and expensive for Chicago residents to have a handgun, to exercise their Second Amendment rights, which were supposedly guaranteed by the United States Supreme Court, but weren't, in fact, guaranteed by the United States Supreme Court. Now that's worrying enough. The taxes, the one gun per homeowner restriction, that's pretty strange and pretty contrary to the spirit and the letter of the law. It's subverting the highest court in the United States by a thug, for lack of a better word. Chicago Mayor Richard Daley, the guy who threatened to bugger someone with a gun. So the really worrying part isn't all that, and that's pretty worrying in and of itself. But the really worrying part, at least to me, is that Chicago is saying that these guns, or a similar gun in Chicago by a lawful owner, has to have a trigger lock on it. Now you'd think, okay, that's no big deal. But it only has to have a trigger lock on it in the house if there are children in the house. Now how in the world is Chicago going to know which house with a handgun has children in it? Are they really going to keep track of that? It seems they are. And how are they going to know if a particular gun has a trigger lock? Are they going to enter through the door with police to check people's handguns to see if there's a trigger lock on it? It's possible. If this law passes, it is possible that they could do that. They have a reasonable expectation that perhaps some handgun owner doesn't have a trigger lock. Children are in danger. The judge writes a warrant, and bam, a SWAT team comes through the door. Now, I am not a lunatic. I don't wear a tin hat. But I am an American who likes to be able to say that I have a right to own a handgun, to defend my family, and that that right shall not be abridged by anybody, the state or the federal government. That's a right guaranteed to me by the Constitution of the United States of America, and it's guaranteed to Chicago residents the same way. They should not stand for these city council regulations and ordinances regarding handguns. This should be the straw that breaks the camel's back, that destroys the Chicago machine. Because the Chicago machine is based on power over others, not democratic power, not representing the people, but imposing their will upon the people. Now, if the people are so stupid as to allow Chicago to take away a right which was just granted to them by the United States Supreme Court, then they will get what they deserve. But if residents of Chicago understand that this is a critical issue, that this is where they should draw the line, then perhaps we will see a new day in that corrupt city. Perhaps we will see a day when the power goes back to the people from which it supposedly comes. This is power. Now, I'm not going to point it at a politician or threaten to shove it up someone's ass and fire it. But this is the power that the United States gives to each citizen to protect themselves, to take care of themselves, and also to protect themselves from their own government. Now, that's not a protection that Mayor Daley wants his residents, his voters, his people to have. The question is, are they going to stand up for their rights? Because the NRA can't do it. I can't do it from here. It's up to the people of Chicago to get rid of the people who would impose tyranny, who would abridge their rights. The choice is theirs. I recommend that they do what it takes to be able to do what it takes to protect their lives and exercise their freedoms.